Imagine waking up one morning and discovering that every single struggle in your life, maybe it's physical pain, maybe it's, you know, mental anguish, confusion,
Mm.
it all traces back.
Generations.
Exactly. Generations before you even born, decisions made because of this, like obsession with pure bloodlines,
Right.
where your own family tree isn't this healthy thing, it's more like a tangled, choking vine.
Mm.
Today, we're diving deep into, well, a pretty horrifying historical reality, a kind of genetic destiny that condemned so many women in European royalty to lives of suffering they never asked for.
Absolutely.
We're going to unpack the hidden truths behind history's most inbred women. It's a title that really only hints at the genetic nightmare we're about to explore.
It's really stark when you think about it. What they saw as, divine right or just smart politics.
Right.
It came at this unbelievable human cost. European royalty, they genuinely believed their blue blood was, well, different.
Literally different.
Yeah, pure, maybe blessed by God. They thought marrying within their own families, their own lines, would keep that power, that wealth, secure.
But they had no idea what they were actually doing.
Not a clue. They couldn't grasp they were basically creating a genetic time bomb.
Especially families like the Habsburgs, their motto, right? Let others wage wars. You, happy Austria, marry.
Wow. So marriage was their main strategy.
It really was. So today, we're going to sort of give you a shortcut to understanding the huge human and scientific implications of this really dark chapter.
Okay, so let's dive in with our first story. We're heading to Vienna, 1634.
Okay.
We'll meet Maria Anna of Austria, born with this Habsburg curse already written into her genes, you could say.
It wasn't just a minor thing either.
No, not at all. Her whole life was defined by it, a direct result of, well, generations of cousins marrying cousins. It made her family tree so tangled it, resembled a noose.
And from her earliest years, Maria Anna's life was just different. While other kids were running around, playing,
She struggled just to walk. Her spine was unnaturally curved, forcing her into this posture that made breathing, a constant effort.
oh man.
And her jaw, it protruded so severely that eating solid food was this exhausting ordeal. Her servants actually had to cut her meat into tiny, tiny pieces for her.
Wow. Beyond just the physical pain, though, her life really gives us this chilling look at how much denial was baked into the system back then, right?
Totally.
Like, imagine growing up surrounded by portraits of your ancestors, and you see your own issues mirrored back at you. That jawline on an uncle, maybe a grandmother with a similar spine.
It must have been crushing.
Yeah, realizing you're not unique, you're just the latest victim in this long, silent line of genetic problems. And the doctors...
Useless, basically. They just offered euphemisms. They'd whisper about the Habsburg curse behind her back, but never to her face.
So they'd say things like mysterious ailments or God's will.
Exactly. Never admitting the obvious truth of what was happening.
And this denial, it just pushed her into isolation, didn't it?
Yeah, profound isolation. She spent her days hidden away, dim rooms, curtains drawn.
But her mind was sharp.
Very sharp. That was like one of the few parts of her body that worked with that issue. She found escape in books, discovered worlds where bloodlines didn't matter.
That's something, at least.
It is, but outside those books, reality always hit hard. She became a kind of clinical case study. Her issues documented with this chilling detachment by the court physicians.
And the loneliness must have just piled on top of the physical pain.
Absolutely. Potential suitors, who were often her own cousins, remember.
Right.
They'd recoil when they saw her condition. Marriage talks would start, then just ducks off. Once they knew how severe her deformities were.
So she never married.
Never married, not by choice. Her genes had basically made her undesirable in that system. She died young, only 32. Her body just gave out under the weight of all that accumulated genetic damage.
And the official cause.
Various ailments listed on the death certificate. But the real truth, looking back, is that generations of her ancestors chose power over, well, basic humanity.
Okay, from Austria, let's shift our focus. Our deep dive takes us to Spain now, and maybe one of the most tragic and debated figures in all this.
Joanna of Castile.
Exactly. Known as Juana la Loca, or Joanna the Mad. And what's so compelling here is this question about her madness. Was it, inherent, or was it just a cool result of her situation and her family background?
It's a tough question. Born in 1479, daughter of Isabella and Ferdinand, the famous Catholic monarchs.
Right.
She was smart, educated, spoke several languages. But like Maria Anna, the seeds of her problems were already there in her genes. Her parents were cousins, part of that same tangled web.
And things got worse after she married.
Oh, definitely.
Yeah.
Her marriage to Philip the Handsome of Burgundy, it was meant to be a political alliance, but it turned into this psychological battlefield. Philip was unfaithful, cold, manipulative.
And
Her love for him was intense, almost obsessive. And others, well, they easily labeled that as madness.
then Philip died suddenly in 1506. That seems to be the turning point.
It was the unraveling. Her grief it went somewhere else. Something darker, more obsessive. She refused to let him be buried.
She traveled with his coffin.
Yeah, traveled across Spain with his coffin, opening it regularly to kiss his decomposing corpse. It's horrifying, absolutely, but it speaks to this profound psychological crisis, doesn't it? Extreme isolation probably created an attachment that even death couldn't sever.
But modern historians think there might be more to it.
Increasingly, yeah. Many believe her madness was largely political. A convenient excuse used by her father and later her son to basically sideline a legitimate queen and take her power.
So her behavior, while extreme,
Could be seen as a response to severe depression, anxiety, maybe even PTSD, all made worse by decades of isolation and emotional abuse.
but the genetic angle is still there.
We can't ignore it. Her family tree shows clear patterns of mental illness, depression, anxiety, things we know become more common, more severe with inbreeding. Her great-grandmother had similar issues. Her own daughter, Catherine, later showed signs of severe depression too. The pattern, looking back now, seems unmistakable.
And her end. She was confined, wasn't she?
For 46 years, confined in the Royal Convent of Santa Clara, conditions were awful. Dark, cold rooms, barely enough food, denied basic hygiene. Reports say she'd tear her clothes, scream for hours.
46 years.
46 years. She died in 1555, still locked away. Her death barely registered. She'd been effectively erased from public memory long before, just written off as a madwoman, not seen as a victim of a system that valued politics over people.
It's just heartbreaking. Which brings us to our next story, and this one really highlights how the system impacted children right from birth, stripping them of any say in their lives.
Yeah, this is tough.
We're looking at Margaret Teresa, born in the Spanish court. We actually know what she looked like because of those incredible paintings by Diego Velázquez.
That's right. Daughter of Philip V of Spain and his niece, Mariana of Austria.
Another uncle-niece pairing.
Yeah, disturbingly common by then among the Habsburgs.
And Velázquez's paintings, what do they show?
Well, they show this child dressed in these incredibly elaborate court gowns, but if you look closely, you can see hints of the Habsburg genetic damage.
Even then.
Even then. Velázquez was diplomatic, sure, but he was too honest an artist to hide everything. Her jaw protrudes slightly, just a hint of the deformities that would get worse. There's this distant, almost vacant look in her eyes, suggesting developmental delays. Even her posture as a child hints at the spinal problems that reign in the family.
But the biggest tragedy wasn't just her physical state, was it? It was her total lack of control.
Absolutely none. From the moment she was born, every decision about her life, her future, was made by men who saw her as a pawn, a dynastic tool, not a person.
And she was promised in marriage very young.
To her uncle, Leopold I, the Holy Roman Emperor. She was just a toddler when the deal was struck. He was 26, her father's brother.
It's just unbelievable.
Her entire purpose was just laid out. Marry her uncle, produce heirs, keep the Habsburg line going. Her education focused entirely on making her an attractive bride for this arranged marriage.
And the marriage happened when she was 15.
15, in 1666. That was basically the end of any childhood she might have had left.
And then the pressure to have children started immediately.
Instantly. Despite her age, her obviously frail health, she was expected to produce children. She went through multiple pregnancies. Her first child lived only a few months. The second was a miscarriage.
Did any survive?
She eventually had a son who survived infancy, but the relief didn't last. It quickly became clear he'd inherited the whole spectrum of Habsburg genetic problems.
And Margaret Teresa herself.
She just got weaker with each pregnancy, suffered from what we'd now call severe anemia, respiratory issues, maybe epilepsy. The court doctors wrote it all down, documented her decline.
But never connected it to the inbreeding.
Never made the connection. Or if they did, they didn't dare say it. Margaret Teresa died in 1673, just 6 years after getting married. She was only 21.
21.
Her body just gave up, And the mourning was for the loss of a potential source of heirs, not for the tragedy of this young woman whose life was just sacrificed.
Let's journey now to the glittering court of Versailles, a very different setting, but similar issues.
Right.
We meet a Spanish princess there, Anna of Austria, facing the hidden costs of her Habsburg heritage. Her story really shines a light on the immense pressure and often the blame put on these women.
Anna was the daughter of Philip III of Spain and Margaret of Austria.
Another uncle-niece pairing. It's relentless.
It really was. Astonishingly, it was seen as normal, even desirable in those circles.
In Anna's early life, did it follow the same pattern?
Very much so. She developed slowly, had learning difficulties, that noticeable Habsburg jaw, making speech and eating hard, and perhaps most telling, signs of what we now call severe anxiety and depression, just a constant quiet struggle for her.
Then, at 14, she's married off to Louis III of France.
Right, 1615, a complex diplomatic deal, torn from everything she knew, thrown into this foreign court, and the marriage itself was troubled.
How so?
Louis XIII was cold, distant, maybe dealing with his own issues, depression, or possibly homosexuality. Anna was trapped. She had to produce male heirs as queen, but as a Habsburg, she carried genetic defects, making healthy pregnancies really difficult.
So miscarriages, infant deaths.
Her first several pregnancies ended that way. Each loss just deepened her depression and anxiety. It was a vicious cycle.
And the court blamed her.
Completely. The doctors, blind to genetics, blamed Anna, subjected her to these painful, humiliating treatments, bloodletting, purging, weird diets. They even examined her intimate areas looking for defects. It never occurred to them that the problem was the generations of cousin marriage.
That's horrific. She must have felt so alone.
Her isolation just got deeper and deeper, year after year, with no surviving heir. She was targeted by vicious court gossip, whispers about being cursed. The pressure got so bad she started showing signs of severe agoraphobia, terrified of public appearances, hiding away in her rooms.
But eventually she did have children.
Yeah, the miracle, as they called it. After 23 years of marriage, it must have felt unreal. She gave birth to a healthy son, the future Louis XIV, the Sun King.
Why? 23 years.
Then a second son, Philippe, 2 years later. It secured the succession, finally gave her some relief from that crushing pressure.
But did it fix everything for her?
Not really. The physical and emotional damage of all those years couldn't just be erased. She remained a deeply anxious, depressed woman, found little lasting joy, even with her sons. Her later years were marked by more physical problems and these melancholy attacks that often left her bedridden.
Her legacy, then, is more than just being the Sun King's mother.
Oh, absolutely. It's another stark reminder of the human cost of a system that basically treated women as breeding stock.
Right. Okay, moving forward in time now to a name literally everyone knows, Marie Antoinette. We mostly remember her for the French Revolution, obviously, but her story is also tangled up in this same Habsburg tradition and its consequences.
Definitely. She was the daughter of Empress Maria Theresa of Austria and Francis I. Now, their marriage wasn't quite as close as some Habsburg unions, but it still carried that genetic legacy from centuries of cousin marriages.
So when she arrived in France in 1770, just 14 years old?
She wasn't just bringing hopes for an alliance. She was carrying that hidden Habsburg genetic baggage, too. You can even see it subtly in her portraits. Beautiful, yes, but that slightly protruding lower lip, that distinctive jawline,
yeah,
it was there.
And she had health issues, too, like the others.
Yeah, what the court doctors vaguely called feminine difficulties. Severe menstrual problems, frequent miscarriages, hormonal imbalances, all very likely linked to those genetic factors.
And her marriage to Louis VI wasn't easy either.
Troubled from the start. Both of them were young, both grappling with their own genetic inheritances. Louis showed signs of maybe developmental delays, social awkwardness, making intimacy hard. Marie Antoinette struggled with the anxiety and depression that plagued Habsburg women.
And the pressure for an heir must have been intense.
Huge. For 7 years, the marriage wasn't consummated. Vicious rumors flew. Doctors examined her again and again, looking for physical problems, but they just didn't get that both partners were likely dealing with issues rooted in their shared inbred heritage.
But she did eventually have children.
She did, but the pregnancies weren't easy. Severe morning sickness, anxiety attacks, what looks like prenatal depression with her first. Her daughter, Marie-Thérèse, was healthy, but later pregnancies brought miscarriages and infant deaths, which took a terrible psychological toll.
And it's striking how these personal struggles, maybe linked to her genetics, intersected with the French Revolution.
Absolutely. Her anxiety, her depression, possibly made worse by those inbreeding-related hormonal issues, likely made it incredibly difficult for her to handle the complex, terrifying political situation. Her tendency towards maybe impulsive decisions or emotional outbursts,
Became fatal flaws.
in that volatile environment, yes. Traits that might have been manageable otherwise became fatal flaws as France spiraled into revolution,
And that infamous phrase, let them eat cake.
which she almost certainly never said. But it shows how her enemies used what could have been symptoms of underlying mental health issues, maybe mood swings, maybe anxiety, to paint her as callous, completely out of touch.
So was it circumstantial or genetic?
Historians still debate it. Were her reactions purely situational, or did they reflect those underlying psychiatric conditions common in the Habsburg line, cruelly twisted and used against her? It's hard to say for sure.
During her imprisonment and trial, she showed courage, but there were other signs too.
Yeah, reports mention periods that sound like dissociative episodes. Similar things affected other Habsburg women under extreme stress. Guards noted times she seemed confused, had trouble focusing during interrogation, times she just retreated into herself.
Her execution in 1793, it wasn't just the end of a queen.
No, it was the end of a life, sure, but also the symbolic end of a genetic line that had shaped European history for centuries. There was maybe a kind of resignation about her, someone who never fully understood why her life had been so incredibly difficult.
We've looked at these individual lives, completely shattered by this genetic legacy. But to really get the scale of it all,
Yeah, we need to zoom out. Look at how entire generations were devastated. The Spanish infantas, the princesses of the late 17th, early 18th centuries, they represent maybe the most concentrated example of this genetic catastrophe.
these were the daughters and granddaughters of Charles II of Spain.
Exactly. And Charles II himself, I mean, he was so profoundly inbred, his genetic coefficient, that's a measure of how related your parents are, was higher than what you typically see in children born to a brother and sister.
Wow.
He was impotent, epileptic, possibly intellectually disabled, just the absolute terminal result of 16 generations of relentless Habsburg inbreeding.
And his female relatives, the infantas, they suffered maybe even more because they were still expected to marry and have kids.
Precisely. Their stories are like medical case studies predicting the dynasty's end. Take Maria Margarita, born 1651. Severe developmental delays. Records say she couldn't speak clearly till age 7, struggled to walk, showed signs of what we might now see as autism spectrum disorders.
But still considered marriageable.
Oh yes, royal blood, you see. She was married off to her cousin Leopold Arrest, the same guy who'd been married to Margaret Theresa. The marriage was predictably a disaster.
And others.
Maria Theresa suffered from falling sickness, almost certainly epilepsy. Had respiratory problems so bad she could barely climb stairs. Her jaw was so malformed she could only eat liquids. Her spine was severely curved, needed support just to sit up.
Their home, the Alcazar of Madrid, must have been grim.
More hospital than palace, constantly filled with doctors, surgeons, priests, attending to these royal children, all suffering from different symptoms of the same underlying genetic disaster. The palace records from that time, they read like a medical textbook on extreme inbreeding.
Yet, despite all this suffering, they were still expected to produce heirs.
Relentlessly. Marriage negotiations continued even when they were obviously unfit for childbearing. Other European courts got detailed medical reports on their conditions.
Not out of concern, though.
No. To assess their potential value as breeding stock.
The psychological torture must have been immense.
Unimaginable. Growing up knowing your only value is to have children, but your own body, your genetics, makes that almost impossible. Living with this constant fear of pregnancy, knowing it risked your life, and likely meant producing even more damaged children.
And the records show this.
Heartbreakingly, yes. Letters between royal women describe constant miscarriages, infant deaths, the dread around every pregnancy. They talk about babies born so deformed they couldn't survive.
How did they cope?
Many developed severe anxiety, deep depression, PTSD, became reclusive, ashamed, and maybe the saddest part, with no understanding of genetics, they often blamed themselves, saw their struggles as personal failures or even divine punishment.
Which brings us to the science behind it all. For centuries, it was a mystery, right? But now genetics gives us the answer: inbreeding depression.
Exactly. It's all about recessive genes. When closely related people reproduce, their kids have a much higher chance of inheriting two identical copies of harmful recessive genes.
which are normally hidden.
Right. In a diverse population, they're usually masked by a healthy copy from the other parent. But when cousins marry cousins, generation after generation, like the Habsburgs did for centuries,
Those harmful genes build up.
they accumulate and compound. Each generation gets more likely to express these severe genetic disorders that would normally stay hidden.
And this affects more than just physical traits.
Oh, much more. It hits physical traits, mental health, immune function, fertility,
Yeah.
everything. The famous Habsburg Jaw mandibular prognathism, that's the most visible example. It got more pronounced over generations until some couldn't even close their mouths properly or chew.
But that was just the tip of the iceberg.
Absolutely. Modern genetic analysis strongly suggests they also had higher rates of epilepsy, intellectual disabilities, anxiety disorders, severe depression, immune system problems.
So those mysterious illnesses.
Were likely autoimmune disorders caused directly by this accumulating genetic damage.
And the fertility problems make sense too.
Completely. Inbreeding dramatically increases genetic incompatibilities, makes conception hard, pregnancy dangerous. The high rates of miscarriage and infant mortality weren't just bad luck or poor medicine, they were the inevitable result of this genetic damage.
And the psychological issues, like with Joanna or Marie Antoinette.
You can see them as strong genetic predispositions to mental illness, which were then brutally triggered and amplified by the immense stress of their lives. They weren't inherently mad, they were genetically vulnerable, and their circumstances pushed them over the edge.
Okay, so after hearing all these devastating stories, the big question is, how did this system keep going, despite the obvious harm? And what can we learn from its end?
It's baffling in hindsight. Royal courts had detailed records. They saw the health problems generation after generation, yet they kept arranging cousin marriages. Why? Politics, dynastic stability. It always came first.
The medical reports were just seen as curiosities.
Pretty much. Medical curiosities rather than urgent warnings. Political and economic goals just took precedence over human well-being every time.
It's easy to judge now, but from their perspective, believing in divine right, maybe there was a twisted logic, preserving something sacred.
You could argue that. And even the Catholic Church, which could have stepped in, often didn't. They granted dispensations for these close marriages, effectively sanctioning them. The idea that royal blood was divinely ordained often trumped preventing suffering.
And sometimes the women themselves bought into it.
In a tragic way, yes. Raised to believe their blood was superior, some actively sought marriages with relatives to keep that perceived purity. They couldn't see they were partaking in their own genetic destruction.
And maybe the most heartbreaking part is just hope. Each generation hoping their kids would be okay.
That desperate hope, enduring pregnancy after pregnancy, loss after loss, just hoping against hope the next child will be healthy. It's incredibly sad.
So how did it finally end?
The Habsburg genetic experiment essentially imploded with Charles II of Spain. His death in 1700, without any heirs because he was so genetically damaged, it sparked the War of Spanish Succession.
The ultimate consequence.
Right. That marked the end of the Spanish Habsburg line and the beginning of a slow, grudging realization across Europe that this level of royal inbreeding was just unsustainable. Cousin marriages continued, yes, but they gradually became less common, less close, as courts started to understand the risks.
Is there any kind of redemptive legacy here? Anything positive to come out of all this suffering?
It's bittersweet, but yes. Their suffering wasn't entirely meaningless. Their pain, all meticulously documented in those court records and medical texts, it provided crucial evidence for the development of modern genetics.
Really?
Yeah. The Habsburgs tragically became this huge data set. Their pain helped us understand recessive genes, why genetic diversity is vital, how hereditary diseases work.
So their tragedy helped science.
In a profound way, yes.
The women we've discussed then, Maria, Anna, Joanna, Margaret Teresa, Anna, Marie Antoinette, all those forgotten infantas, they were real people.
Absolutely. Not just names in a history book. Their stories are this powerful reminder, aren't they, about putting human welfare first above politics, recognizing individual dignity, understanding that even powerful institutions can cause immense suffering when basic human values get lost.
Let's go back to that thought from the beginning. Waking up to that terrible realization. For these women, that wasn't imagination. It was their daily reality. But even in all that pain, you see something, human resilience maybe? Maria Anna finding escape in books, Joanna's fierce love, even distorted, Margaret Teresa's quiet dignity, Anna's faith, Marie Antoinette's courage at the end.
Yeah, the human spirit finding ways to assert itself, even in the darkest places, just enduring.
The specific curse of keeping royal bloodlines pure is mostly over, thankfully, but maybe the underlying issue isn't gone.
That's the provocative thought, isn't it? What forces in our world today, maybe in different disguises, still reduce people to means to an end, still value ideology or tradition or profit over compassion and individual well-being.
You could think about tensions between cultural traditions and genetic health in some communities today, or how political or economic goals sometimes just steamroll individual dignity.
Exactly. Their legacy is tragic, yes, but also redemptive in a way. They paid a terrible price for a lesson their ancestors refused to learn. Human worth isn't measured by bloodline. True nobility is about acknowledging our shared humanity. So the question for us today is, what does that really mean for how we live, how we structure our societies now?